This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everybody. Parshas Chukas. Certainly the most prominent feature of Parshas Chukas is the paraduma, the red heifer. But as an introduction to the paraduma, we have to understand that what the paraduma is trying to accomplish is it's trying to accomplish the concept of Tahara, purity. Now, what exactly is purity? What does it mean to be tahar? What does it mean to be pure? What does that mean? It's a certain state, it's a certain level of existence. That's what we'd like to explore tonight, to try to understand what exactly is tahara. Well, the Gemara tells us about the process of the paraduma. Now, if I were to ask you, where in Talmud Bavli is there a Masechta that talks about the paraduma? The answer is there is none. Paraduma, Masechta Paros, and Masechta in Taharos. There's no Talmud Bavli on Taharos. But you have various random Mishnayos collected throughout Shas. And on Daf Beis Amud Aleph and Masechta Yuma, the Gemara in Yuma quotes a Mishnah in Para. And the Mishnah says 7 days before we would burn the ashes of the paraduma, we would separate the kohen who would be involved with it, and we would bring him to a special chamber, which was the northeast corner of the bira. And the name of this chamber was Lishkas Beis HaEven. And why was it called Lishkas Beis HaEven? Well, all the articles there, all the kalim there had to be made out of material that is not mekabel tumah. Is not susceptible to become tamei. So all the kalim there were made out of glolim, either the dung of animals, which is not susceptible for tumah, or stone, which is not susceptible for tumah, or earth. Okay? Now this is very important to know. There is a hierarchy when it comes to tumah and tahara, and that hierarchy is the more pure something has to be, the higher the standards. So let's say Meiser has higher standards than Chulan. Truma we're more careful with than Meiser. Kachim we're more careful with even than Truma. But the thing that has to be preserved with the most purity is the paraduma, the ashes of paraduma. Because it's such a powerful source of Tahara that it could take the biggest davar tummy in the world, something that comes into contact with a dead body, and it could render it tahar. Therefore, any process involved with the paraduma must be carried out with the utmost Tahara, with the utmost purity. But there's one anomaly to that. Okay, and this is not so well known, but this is really outstanding. And that is, the kohen who was involved with the paraduma, a prerequisite was, we had to make him tamei. Not like you thought, not like they taught you in yeshiva, that someone who sprinkles the ashes of the paraduma becomes tamei. It's not true. Someone who sprinkles the paraduma does not become tamei. It's only someone who is handling it. But there's a very unknown halacha that we would take this kohen, despite the fact that we would separate him from his house 7 days before the process, in order to make sure he doesn't come into contact with tumah, we would take a sheretz, we would take a dead rat, and we would throw it at him. We would put it on his face. We would touch him with it. We would be metame, the kohen involved with the greatest maisa of Tahara. And after we do that, we throw him in the mikvah, and we're matahar him. But the thing is, what's important to know, okay, every Jew must know this. It's the first mission of brachas. So this way, after 120, you'll be able to answer the first question. Okay? The halacha is like this. After a person becomes tamei with a sheretz, you go to the mikvah. Are you tahar? No. Or let's say somebody experiences, they become a balkari. They experience nocturnal emission, or somebody has relations. They become tamei, and they go to the mikvah. Are they tahar? No. They're not completely tahar. They need to wait till sunset. Until sunset, they're called tvul yom. They have a certain degree of tahara, and that is they went to the mikvah, but they're at tvul yom. They still need to wait for sunset. So the guy involved with the para aduma, you would think we should take a guy who's completely tahar. No, not true. We don't do that. We take a guy who's tahar, and we make him tamei. And if we don't make him tamei, he's disqualified. And then we throw him in the mikvah. And if the sun sets, he's disqualified. he can only do it before the sun sets. He has to be a tfol yain. He has to have that semblance of tumah, otherwise he cannot perform the service of paraduma. It's a Mishnah in Para. Says the Gemara, D'Tanan, Mitamin hayu hakoyin hasoref es hapara. We make tamei, the koyin that burns the para, and umatvilanois, and then we stick him in the mikvah, and we don't allow the sun to set. Why? Lahoitzi mi liban shel tzedaikin, to show that the tzedaikim, the Sadducees, were wrong. Because the tzedaikim say paraduma is such a davar tahar that it's not enough to go to the mikvah, you have to wait for harav shemesh. So in order to show that the tzedaikim are wrong, we do not allow harav shemesh. We throw the sheretz at him, we throw him in the mikvah, and we have him do it before the sun sets. Why? Because the tzedaikim say, shahayu oimrim, b'ma urve hashemesh hoitza nasis, that the paraduma was only processed by someone who had sunset. And therefore, lest someone think, well, we're getting this guy to be involved with the para, he was tamei a minute ago, we just threw him in the mikvah, and he didn't yet have the purification of sunset, so you would think the paraduma is a very lenient thing, so we have other chumrais to preserve the Tahara, and that is all the kalim involved in using the paraduma were kalim that are not huchshir l'kabel tumah. They're not susceptible to tumah. They're either made out of glalim, dung, avonim, stone, or adama, earth. So this is what we want to explore tonight. This is one of the, if we could say, the strangest halachos in Kol HaTorah Kula. That you take the guy who, he has to maintain himself on the highest standard of Tahara to be involved in the paraduma. We preserve him 7 days. He doesn't go out. He doesn't walk out into the street. He doesn't go anywhere. But yet, right before he's involved in the paraduma, what do? We make him tamei. Isn't that odd? No, it's not odd. We want to show that tzedaikim are wrong. Now let's get what the machlokes was. What did the tzedaikim hold? What did the prushim hold? What did the chachamim hold? Well, the tzedaikim held. The pasuk says, "V'hiza hatahar al hatamei." The guy who's involved in the sprinkling is a tahar. Tahar means either he never became tamei, or if he did, he went to the mikvah and he had harav shemesh. He had sunset. But the chachamim say no. And you have to be a chacham to understand. If the Torah says he's a tahar, obviously he's a tahar. What would you think? It already called him a tahar in Sukkim earlier. This is the paraduma we're speaking about. It needs to say only a tahar could do it. The fact that the Torah calls him tahar, it must mean someone who was tamei and he became tahar but not completely. You hear that? You see the difference between a tzedukah and a chacham? Tzedukah says, it says tahar, it means tahar. A chacham says, it says tahar, it means tamei. That's the oral law. So that's the oral law. Without the oral law, the Torah says the guy has to be tahar. The chacham say no. Tahar means he became tahar, basically. That's the drasha. Because we already know he's tahar. Why does it have to re-emphasize his tahar? To say he's still in the general guidelines of tahar, even though he's not perfectly tahar. But nevertheless, we're going to feature a sefer today. We've featured the author many times. We've never featured the sefer. The name of the sefer is Shilas Uchuvas Ben Pairas. Now, if with a title like that, you know one thing about the author's first name. His name is Yosef, right? And these are the Chuvas of Rabbi Yosef Engel. Shilas Uchuvas of Rabbi Yosef Engel, Ben Pairas. Okay? And he wants to know very simply, this halacha is really counterintuitive. The item that has the highest standards of Tahara is the paraduma. It's maintained more pure than meiser, than truma, than kachim. If you look in Chagiga Yirches Amud Beis, the Gemara in Chagiga says, a guy who eats someone else's chulin might not eat his meiser. A guy who eats someone else's meiser may not eat his truma. Someone who eats someone else's truma may not eat his kachim. And the highest standard is the Efer Para. So if the Efer Para has the highest standard, does it make sense just to show that tzedaikim are wrong, we're going to go out of our way to compromise the halacha? After all, if you have two people to choose to be involved in the paraduma, a guy who was tamei and went to the mikveh and had sunset, or a guy who didn't have sunset. You're going to compromise the halacha and get the guy who didn't have sunset? It's a disgrace to the halacha. This is the paraduma we're dealing with. Why dafka pick a guy who's on a lower degree of Tahara than the guy who's on a higher degree of Tahara? Just to show that tzaddikim are wrong? We don't do such things. I mean, if you want to show that tzaddikim are wrong, you could spend your entire life showing the tzaddikim are wrong. They disagree with every single halacha on the Torah Shabbat Peh. They don't hold tefillin have to be black. They hold the tefillin have to be here. So do we have a mitzvah to take a rubber band and suspend a seltzer bottle between your eyes to show that tzaddikim are wrong? I mean, you could take every single halacha. The tzaddikim say that they argue on every halacha of Torah Shabbat Peh. So take out a Gemara and you can invent a new religion. Everything they do, we'll do keneged them. Now we do find instances in Shas where we do counteract the tzaddikim. For instance, in the Gemara Menachos on Daf Samachay, the Mishnah speaks about how the tzaddikim hold that you cut the omer mimachras hashabbos on a Sunday, and only during the day and not at night. And we hold the day after Pesach and dafka at night, so that it's tamimos. And the Mishnah goes on to say that everyone would gather at the procedure of cutting the omer, and it would be harvested be'esek gado, with great pomp and ceremony, with great fanfare. Why? To show that the tzaddikim are wrong. And the Mishnah goes on to say that as soon as it became dark, we go over to the guy cutting the grain and we say, Ba Shemesh, is it sunset? Omer Hain. He would say, yeah. Ba Shemesh, is it sunset? Omer Hain. And then we say, Magol Zu, this sickle you can use? Hain. Magol Zu, yeah. You're going to use Kupa Zu, this box? Hain. Kupa Zu, this box? Yeah. Even though it's Shabbos? Yeah. Even though it's Shabbos? Yeah. And the Mishnah says we ask every question 3 times. So what happened? The guy cutting the omer is deaf? We have to ask him 3 times? It's just to point out that we're going against the Baitusim. Because the Baitusim say you don't do Kitsira Balayla, and the Baitusim say you don't do it the day after Pesach. So we want to emphasize, we do it at night, and we do it on Shabbos, and we do what the Torah says, not like the Baitusim. But we're not compromising the halacha. We're not doing anything to do the halacha in a less mahudr way, in a less beautiful way, in order to counteract the tzaddikim. We're doing the correct way, and we're pointing out that we don't care what the tzaddikim think. But to specifically pick a guy for the paraduma who we made tamei, I mean, it's ridiculous. You want to say if you happen to find someone who's tamei, and he happened to be a tful yom, you could use him also. But to take a nice Jewish guy who's clean, he never saw a rat in his life, and to throw a rat at his face before he does the paraduma, why are you tormenting the poor guy? He's going to need to see a psychologist after. He's going to have like trauma control after putting the sherets on him. Why are we being matame the guy and compromising the halach? There's a sifra. Another question. Okay, listen. You know what the sifra is? Sifra is the Torah Shabbat Peh on Sefer Vayikra, otherwise known as Teiras Kayanim. The Sifra says there's a pasuk in Shmini, Uvenivlasam loy siga'u. Don't touch an avela. Rabbi say, if you see a dead carcass on the road, is there an avera to touch a dead carcass? Anybody know? No. Raise your hand if you think there's an avera to touch a dead carcass. There's no avera to touch a dead carcass. Right? What about a kohen? Is a kohen allowed to touch a dead carcass? No. Why not? Lenefesh lo yitama ba'amav. So what does it mean? Don't be metame to an avela. So then the Sifra says, I would think if you touch an avela, you get malchus. After all, it says uvenivlasam loisigo. Therefore, the pasuk says no. Ulaela titamo. You're allowed to become tamei to an avela. Oh, says the Sifra from the pasuk ulaela titamo. You might think it's a mitzvah to become tamei to an avela. And therefore the Torah has to say, Uvenivlasam loisigo, don't touch an avela, which means it's rishus. You want to touch a dead cow? No problem. You want to touch a dead horse? No problem. It's not a mitzvah. I would have thought it's a mitzvah. And therefore the Torah says, Uvenivlasam loisigo, it's not a mitzvah. Now could somebody please tell me why in the world would you think such a far out thing that it's a mitzvah to touch a carcass? It's a mitzvah. The Sifra says, I would think it's a mitzvah to touch a carcass. Imagine, what do you do today? Did a lot of mitzvahs. Put on tefillin, I davened, I helped an old lady across the road, and there was a dead horse that smelled so bad the vultures wouldn't go near it, and I gave it a hug. I was Makayim the mitzvah of Ula'ela Titamo. Why would you ever think there's a mitzvah to become Tamei to an Avela? That is the question of the Rabbi Yosef Engel in the Shas HaTshuva Ben Pairas. He says, number 7, V'hu pliya l'chayra, 2 lines from the end. D'ma hava mino l'faresh ha'pasuk, she'tzivsa Torah l'mitzvah she'yitamei ha'adam atzmai. Why would you think? I mean, you really think the Almighty God would want a Jew to go around touching dead carcasses? I mean, what are you doing, Cholamayid? Well, I'm driving down the Palisades. I heard there are a lot of dead deer there, and instead of going apple picking, which you can't really do on Cholamayid, we're going to go around touching the velos. We'll put on gloves. There'll be a shaila. You're allowed to wear a glove. Maybe it's a mitzvah to do it without a glove. The hiddur. It's Mesiras Nefesh. What can you do? So that's the question. Number 1, why are we dafka metame the kohen who's involved in the ashes of the parah aduma? And what's the havamina of the sifra that there's a mitzvah to become tamei to an avela? I'm going to read to you now a Rambam. This is the whole Shiur. This is what the Shiur is based on. So Rambam, you never heard such a innovative thought of the Rambam. Says the Rambam, Omnam kol oid. This is a Rambam in the Parish HaMishnayis, Masechta Para, Para Gimel, Mishnah Gimel. Kol oid sheyeh etzleinu ish tahar yadua. If you have a pure guy, hine ein hevdel. There's no difference. Bein ish shaloi nitma la'olam, between someone who never became tamei, b'meis, uvein ish asher nitma kol yamav, and a man who was tamei his whole life, v'achar kach toval, and then he became tahar. He went to the mikvah, v'hiza olav gimel v'zayin, and you sprinkled on him the ashes of the paradim on the 3rd and 7th day. Ella, okay, right? So now the Rambam is talking about 2 guys, right? You have, everyone see in the back of the shoulders, Ruvain and Shimon. Ruvain never became tamei in his life. Shimon became tamei, but then we made him tahar. Are they equal? Is one better than the other? So if you would have asked me before the shir, I would have said Ruvain, who never became tamei, is greater than Shimon, who became tamei and then became tahar. I mean, what's the maila of becoming tamei? Says the Rambam, no, there's a difference between them. The guy who became tamei, who touched the dead body, and then went to the mikvah and had the ashes of paraduma, is on a higher level of Tahara than the other guy. Why? Lefisha hapasuk kvar shafat olav shehu tahar. Because the Torah calls him tahar. A guy who touched the dead body and then went to the mikvah and had the ashes of paraduma, the Torah calls him tahar. The other guy, the Torah never calls him tahar. The other guy is just not tamei. Huh? It sounds like semantics. Isn't tahara someone who's just not tamei? So you see from the Rambam, and this is how Rabbi Yosef Engel explains it, that tahara is not what we thought. Tahara is not the absence of tumah. Tahara is a positive madrega, which can only be achieved once you're tamei. You're tamei. A guy, so now it comes out like this. You have 2 guys. They both went to the mikvah. One guy touched the sheretz, one guy didn't touch the sheretz. The guy who didn't touch the sheretz, the mikvah is not doing anything for him. And he remains mediocre. He remains a nobody. He's not tamei and he's not tahar. You could dunk in every mikvah in the world. You could go to Williamsburg, you could go to Borough Park, you go to Flatbush, you go to Monroe, you can even go to the mikvah of the Arizal. You're not tahar. You know why you're not tahar? Because you were never tamei. But if you were tamei and then you went to the mikvah, now the Torah labels you tahar. Tahara is a positive level that's only possible after tumah. That's what the Rambam is machadesh. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, aha! Now we have completely revamped the understanding of the paraduma. Listen very carefully. You know why the guy who's supposed to be in charge and do the procedure of paraduma, we make him tamei? Because we want this guy to be on the highest level of Tahara. And the only way to be on the highest level of Tahara is to make him Tamai and then throw him in the mikvah. We're not making him Tamai to go against the Tzaddikim. We would never compromise the halacha to go against the Tzaddikim. We make him Tamai so that we can make him Tahar. But if you really want the highest level of Tahara, so then you should then even wait for Harav Shemesh. After all, if you want the guy to be really super Tahar, right? This guy is no regular guy. He needs to be super Tahar, man. So fine, let him touch his sharets, throw him in the mikvah, and let him wait for Harav Shemesh. No, we're not going to wait for Harav Shemesh, because then the tzaddikim are going to think that the reason why we're waiting for Harav Shemesh is because in order to be involved in the paraduma, you need Harav Shemesh. But we're not making him tamei to counteract the tzaddikim. We're making him tamei to be able to achieve the highest level of Tahara. So you say, if you want him to achieve the highest level of Tahara, so wait for Harav Shemesh? No. You're going to wait for Harav Shemesh, the tzaddikim are going to think we're being makbid on their halacha that the guy has to be super tahar. You don't have to be mamish super tahar man. You only have to be super tahar man. Well, says the Sifra. The Sifra says, I know the Rambam. Everybody knows that the highest level of Tahara is only someone who becomes Tamei and then becomes Tahar. So if the Torah says, Ule'ela titamo, I would think it's a mitzvah to go around touching the velos. Why? What's the mitzvah? So then go to the mikvah and reach the level of Tahara, which would have been impossible had you never become Tamei. Says the Sifra, no, don't think that. There's still no mitzvah to touch a dead horse and then go to the mikvah. There's no such mitzvah. But you would think, based on such a yesod, that there would be such a mitzvah, because after all, there's no other way to get to Tahara. The answer is, you're right, there's no other way. But you can't bring it up. Don't bring it up. There's no mitzvah to bring it upon yourself. This is the amazing chidush of Rabbi Yosef Engel, based on the Rambam. Okay, it's really amazing. So this is a new understanding of Tahara. Tahara is not someone just lacking impurity. Tahara is someone who has a certain shine. It's a madrega. And it's a madrega that most madregos, you don't have to go down to go up. It's the only madrega that it needs yurida l'soich aliyah. You have to become tamei in order to become tahar. Now I'm going to tell you an amazing idea. Okay? An amazing Gemara. And this comes from, if anybody asks you, what did you learn tonight? Tell them I learned Reb Chaim Brisker stencil. Okay? Not just Stam Reb Chaim Brisker. Because then they're going to think maybe you saw the new print. That's not as chashuv. You tell them, I didn't see the new print. And it's not just Reb Chaim on Moed. This is Reb Chaim on Krisos stencil. Okay? They're going to say, whoa, what's going on in that Torah Samas? Okay? Everybody knows the following case. Toivel v'sharetz biyadai. What does that mean? You touch the sharets, you go to the mikvah, you're clean, yeah? But what if, after you touch the sharets, you were in a mikvah, and you decided that you're going to go in holding on to your towel, just for comfort, and then you look at the towel, it's not a towel, it's a tail. And it's a tail of a rat. And you're being toivel in the mikvah with a rat's tail. It's the case in the Gemara. It's very common in the Gemara. Toivel v'sharetz biyadai. You got the case? You're holding on the rat's tail. Don't worry, it doesn't have rabies. You'll be okay. Toivel v'sharetz biyadai. Are you, now when you emerge from the mikvah, are you tahar? No. How can you be tahar? You continue to be touching the sharets. Why are you not tahar? I say, well, I'll tell you why I'm not tahar. When I went into the mikvah, I purified myself from rat A. But since I'm holding rat B, when I was going in the mikvah, rat B made me tamei again. So the mikvah was effective on what? Again, the guy touched a rat an hour before he went to the mikvah. And then while he's toivel, he's holding on to another rat. So why is he tamei? Is he tamei because, well, the tvila was effective for the first tumah. It's just, he's contracting another tumah now? Or, says Reb Chaim Brisker, in order for a mikvah to work, it has to make you tahar. if this tefillah is not going to make you tar, because you're just going to be tamei anyway because you're still holding on to another rat, then it didn't even remove the first tumah, because the definition of Tahara is not the absence of tumah. Definition of Tahara is a positive level, that if that positive level is not being achieved, the mikvah is not accomplishing anything. And therefore it's not only you're contracting new tumah, but if you're going to be tamei when you come out, the tefillah doesn't work, so you're still tamei with the old tefillah. That's the famous Chakira of Reb Chaim Brisker, to which he says, most definitely the latter. It's not that you're contracting a new tumah. It's that since you're going to be tamei when you come out, the tefillah and the mikvah is ineffective. It's not called tefillah. If it's not tefillah, you still have the same old tumah. Okay? You got that? And now that you have that, I'm going to tell you the most geschmack Yerushalmi you ever heard. Okay? But you have to really pay attention. If, like, your mind feels like it's mushy right now, and fuzzy, and you're not exactly sure where you are, then it might not be so geschmack. But if you're ready to think a little bit, this will be very rewarding. Okay? Says Yerushalmi. 2 cases. Number 10. Okay? 2 cases. And today we're going to be learning the explanation of the Yerushalmi that not only does Reb Chaim Brisker a stencil say, but even the Sefer Sharei Yosher. Who wrote the Sharei Yosher? Rav Shimon Shkop. Shar HaChazakos Perek Chaf Aleph, where he says exactly like Reb Chaim. Okay, listen carefully. It's very beautiful. You have a guy, he's Tamei Meis. And he's going to the mikvah to remove his tumas meis. And while he's in the mikvah, he unknowingly touches a sheretz. He had no idea he touched a sheretz. And he came out, and then he went into the Beis HaMikdash. Now he went to the Beis HaMikdash tamei, because he touched the sheretz. Does he have to bring a carbon? No.
Why not?
Well, we'll have to deal with that. But let's talk about the opposite case. A guy touched the sheretz, so he's going into the mikvah. While he's in the mikvah, he unknowingly touches a dead body, and then he goes into the Beis HaMikdash. He has to bring a carbon.
He doesn't know. He went for
Got it? 2 cases. 1 case is a guy touched a dead body. He went into the mikvah to get off the tumas meis, and while in the mikvah, he touched the sheretz. He goes into the Beis HaMikdash. He doesn't bring a carbon. A guy touched the sheretz, and he goes into the mikvah, and while in the mikvah he touches a dead body, he goes into the Beis HaMikdash, he does bring a carbon. And everybody wants to know what's the exact same case. What difference does it make which tumah came first? Either way he touched the sheretz, either way he touched the dead body, either way he went into the Beis HaMikdash. Why, if he touches the dead body first, and he goes into the mikvah and comes into contact with the sheretz, he doesn't bring a carbon? And if he touches the sheretz and goes into the mikvah and touches the dead body, then he does bring a carbon.
because the body is it's a bigger.
No, he had no, whatever tumah he contracted when he's in the mikvah, it's unknowing. Listen carefully. In order to bring a carbon, you have to have yediyah. The halacha is to bring a carbon chatas, you have to at one point in time know that you were tamei. If you never knew you were tamei and you went to the mikdash, that's not, you need to have yediyah to bring a carbon chatas. You knew and then you forgot. You knew and then you were shoygig. But if you unknowingly contracted tumah and went to the Beis HaMikdash, you don't bring a carbon. So listen carefully. A guy who's tamei meis, he's going into the mikvah to remove tumas meis. While there, he contracts touches a sheretz. Does that tefillah in the mikvah do anything? Yeah. It limits his tumas meis and it downgrades it to tumas sheretz. So is the tefillah labeling him with the label tahar? Yeah, to some extent. He used to be tamei and now he's just tamei. So the tefillah accomplishes. What do you want to nail him for going into the Beis HaMikdash? Sheretz! But the sheretz he contracted unknowingly. So he doesn't bring a carbon. But if he touched the sheretz, and then while in the mikvah he touched a dead body unknowingly, does that tefillah in the mikvah accomplish anything?
No.
Nothing. He's not downgraded from sheretz to meis. because mace is worse than sheretz. So the tefillah doesn't do anything. If the tefillah doesn't do anything, he's still tamei with tumas sheretz. Tumas sheretz, he had a yediyah about. Now he doesn't realize it because he came into contact with a dead body, says Reb Chaim, he brings the karban chatas.
He doesn't know anything.
He doesn't know that he touched the dead body, but he did know that he was tamei with tumas sheretz.
He went to the mikveh after the sheretz.
Good. So that means he's tamei b'shoigeg.
He, as far as I'm concerned, I went to the mikveh after the sheretz. I'm done.
Right. So that's called the shoigeg. That's a regular shoigeg. Shoigeg is, you knew at one time.
So tamei b'shoigeg is a tamei?
Tamei shoigeg is tamei, and you bring a carbon. But tamei never knowing is not a shoigeg. It's beli yediyah klal. It's not. No. He knew he was tamei b'sheretz. He didn't know that it continued. That's a classic shoigeg. But says Reb Chaim, if he knew, if he was tamei mace, and now he's getting off the tumas mace, and now he's getting a new tumah of sheretz, but he never had a yediyah about tumas sheretz, then there's no yediyah, you don't bring a carbon. But says Reb Shimon Shkop, says Reb Chaim Brisker, this is all predicated on the idea that when you go to the mikvah, it doesn't just remove the tumah. It's not a thing, I touched the sheretz, now I'm blue, and when I dunk in the mikvah, it removes the blue. No. Going to the mikvah gives a halachic status of tahar. Tahar is a positive status of purity. And if that positive status of purity cannot be achieved, then you're not tahar. So if you go into the mikvah holding on to a sheretz, it's not that you're contracting a new tumah, it's that we cannot label you the great title of tahar. If you were tamei sheretz, and then you unknowingly became tamei mace in the mikvah doesn't help for the sheretz, because when you come out of that mikvah, we cannot call you tahar. This is all based on the idea of the Rambam that a tahar is not the same thing as someone who's not tamei. A tahar is a positive madrega that's achieved if the mikvah is effective to give you the halachic status of tahar. Okay? To keep things somewhat clear, okay, you were very good. I'm very proud of you. You got that Yerushalmi. You nailed it. You hit it out of the park. You got that Yerushalmi. I'm going to tell you one more thing. This is if you could say, it's probably a race between Daf Tes and Ksubos and Daf Ayin Heyam and Beis and Ksubos. Daf Ayin Heyam and Beis, I don't know. It might have, depends on the day, you could give it the edge. The most lamdisha amud and shas. Daf Ayin Heyam and Beis and Ksubos. The Machloikis from Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua, Cheskas Haguf versus Cheskas Mamoin versus Cheskas Isser. Half of the Shev Shmaitza is either on Daf Tes and Ksubos or Daf Heyam and Beis. Ayin Heyam and Beis. Listen carefully, okay? It's simple. You get it. You're doing good. You're on a roll. If you got the Yerushalmi, you're going to get this. Saras. You ready? Saras. There's a kind of saras of you grow 2 white hairs in a white spot. That's saras. But it has to come in a specific order. First the white spot, and then the white hairs. Im kadam habaheres l'seir lavan, tamei. If the spot comes before the hairs, you're tamei. Im kadam haseir lavan lebaheres, tahar. If the hair comes before the spot, you're tahar. What if you don't know? You weren't really checking the bottom of your foot every day to see if there's a white spot with white hairs. You don't know. You wake up on a Tuesday morning and there's a white spot with white hairs and you have no idea whether the white spot came first or the white hairs came first. Right? The government hasn't put cameras yet in your socks to know exactly what came first. Your white spot or your white hairs. Suffolk! If the white spot came first, tamei. The white hair came first, tar. Suffolk, what would you say?
Just to be on the safe side, you should do it.
So, Albert says, Suffolk d'oraisa l'chumra, right? No. I would say tahar. I would say you're pure. You know why? I have chazaka. The guy's 90 years old. He hadn't had saras his whole life. He went 90 years without saras. There's something called in halacha status quo. Chazaka. Status quo. His body had a status quo of being leprosy free. He did not have saras his whole life. So let the status continue and say if we don't know if he has saras, tahar. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua. Come the Chachamim, and the Chachamim say Tamai. We don't follow the Chazaka, the fact that his body had a status of not being a Mitzayra. Chachamim say Tamai. Says Tosfos and Ksubas Ayin Heyam Beis is one of the most famous Tosfos in Shas. Ask Rabbeinu Tam, how could the Chachamim not hold of Chazaka? Chazaka is a din d'oraisa that we learn out in Chulin, Daf Yud Amud Beis. There are many sources of Chazaka. This man was born without Saras. When his mother picked him up from the hospital, she inspected him, he didn't have Saras. When he was 3 years old, he didn't have Saras. At his bar mitzvah, he didn't have Saras. At his wedding, he didn't have Saras. At his 50th anniversary, he was Saras free. Now you don't know if he has Saras. Chazaka, why do the Chachamim say Tamei? Says Tosfos, listen carefully. Because there's a different Chazaka here. There's a Chazaka that he's Saras free, because he grew up, he lived his whole life without a Saras spot on his foot. But Hacha b'may askinon, says Rabbeinu Tam, where on his right foot there is a Saras which is questionable. What came first? The white spot or the white hair? But on his left foot, he happened to have been a Mitzayra for the last month. A separate nega, which has nothing to do with the nega in question. So he's bechezkas tamei. So on the one hand, his body on his right foot has a status quo that he never had a mark on his right foot that would render him tummy his whole life. So he has a cheskas haguf that says the man is pure. But for the last month, he was a mitzayra because he had a shchin or a michva on his left foot. That's a cheskas iser. So his status quo is he's still a mitzayra. So that chazaka of cheskas iser goes head to head against the chazaka of his body that he doesn't have a problematic nega on his right foot. You hear the shaila now? That is the machloikis, the chachamim and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says, tahar cheskas haguf. You follow the chazaka of his body. The chachamim say, tamei. You follow the status quo of his halachic status. He was a mitzayra for last month. We have a questionable nega on his other foot. Let's say the status quo continues. That's what Tosfos says. You got it? The only possible way to explain the shita of the chachamim that you are tamei is if you say we're talking about a case where the guy had another nega, and therefore he's in the status, he has a status of being a mitzayra. Comes the Shev Shmaitza, one of the most famous Shev Shmaitzas. In Shmaitza, hey, Perek Daled, if they find out you learned Reb Chaim Stencil and the Shev Shmaitza tonight, big stuff. Ask the Shev Shmaitza, but most poskim hold, Ein machzakinon iser le'iser. Which means, the fact that you have a neg on your left foot, what does that got to do with your right foot? Because I have the status of a mitzayra? I'm a status of mitzayra for being a mitzayra for a michva or a shchin. What does that have to do with a spot that I'm not sure if the white hair came before the white spot or not? You can't use the status of one isser and apply it to a questionable other isser. Chazaka is cheskas haguf. That my body was in the status of not having a spot on my right foot. So if I don't know if I have a problem on my right foot, we say that let the status continue. But why would you allow a bad nega on the left foot to affect the right foot? Most poskim hold ein machzakinon iser le'iser. That's the question of the Shev Shmaitza. Shev Shmaitza. Says Reb Shimon Shkop, last step over here. Not a kasha. We hold ein machzakinon iser le'iser. Really, a nega on the left foot has no effect on the right foot. But we're dealing not with Isser, we're dealing with Tumah and Tahara. And in order to be Tahar, as a Mitzayra, you need two things. You need the Kohen to declare you Tahar. You need to go to the mikvah, and the mikvah accomplish Tahara. So listen carefully. Tahara is not the absence of being Tamei. Tahara is a positive quality that we need to declare you with by going to the mikvah. So the guy had a neg on his left foot, and now he's being toivel. He's going to the mikvah for his left foot. When he comes out of the mikvah, was that tefillah effective in rendering him a tahar? We say we don't know. We don't know if it's effective. Because he might not be a tahar. Because he might have a new nega on the right foot. And until you could prove that the mikvah was effective in rendering him tahar, he needs to continue with the same old label of tamei. But you say, but it's a different nega. We can't be machzik from one isser to another isser. It's not that we're using the status of isser of one mikvah for another questionable mareh. It's that in order for a mikvah to work, a mikvah could only work if it's saying to the guy, you're a tahar. Just like we saw. If a guy touched a sheretz, and he's going into the mikvah and he's still holding on to a dead body, the mikvah doesn't work for sheretz, because the mikvah cannot declare him tahar. It doesn't do anything for sheretz. A mikvah has to declare tahar. Well, by the same token, if this guy has a questionable mikvah, then when he went to the mikvah for his first nega, the mikvah can't necessarily proclaim him tahar, because we don't know if he ever extracted himself from the status of being tamei to tahar. So says Rav Shimon Shkop, and this is a very fine svara, an extension of the idea that we're mentioning. But let's just clarify, again, the idea of the Rambam. The idea of the Rambam is that if you have two people, one of them was toivel 1,000 times, and he never became tamei in his life. But you have another guy, he was tamei, and then he went to the mikvah, or then he was involved in the paraduma. That person is more tahar than the person who never became tamei, because tahara is not the absence of tumah. Tahara is a level achieved by removal of tumah. And not only that, that is the reason why Reb Chaim Brisker says, if you're toivel and you hold on to a sheretz, it's not that you're contracting a new tumah, it's that the tahara was proven ineffective and you remain tamei with the same old tumah. And that is why we're suggesting, why Rabbeinu Tam in Masechta Ksubos allows you to use the status of one nega to allow a questionable nega to be problematic, not because of what the Shev Shmaitza says, machzakina and isser le'isser, but rather because in order for a mikvah to work, it has to proclaim definitively, this man is a tahar, and if the guy had a different nega, and now you don't know if he has a new nega, the mikvah cannot extract him from that. Okay? That's the first segment of the shiur. Let's end with the following. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, there's a Gemara in Brachos, and the Gemara Brachos number 20 says, Rav Papa and Rav Huna bread Rabbi Yeshua and Rava Bar Shmuel, they were all eating bread, and Rav Papa said, let me make the bracha, because even though I became tamei through tumas keri, through relation, nevertheless, I had 9 kavin of water poured on my head, and I'm tahar. So Rav Huna breid Rabbi Yeshua said, I'm even better than you. I didn't have 9 kavin of water. I had a better purification. I had tfilas mikvah. So let me make the bracha. And then Rav Huna said, oh, you guys, get out of here. Get out of here. Because I didn't have the 9 kav, and I didn't have the mikvah. Guess what? I never became tamei in the first place. So I'm better than you. So this is straight up against the Rambam. Here we see, it's better to be someone who never became tamei than someone who was tamei and then tar. So that Rabbi Yosef Engel says, no, that's specifically tumas keri. Tumas keri is something that happens through kalos roish, and therefore that specific tumah is, it's not better it's not better when it comes to tumas keri to become tamei and then tar. By that, it's better never to have become tamei in the first place. Says Rabbi Yosef Engel, let me give you the following analogy. You know what this is analogous to? This is analogous to the famous question of who's better? Someone who never did an Aveira in their life, or someone who did an Aveira and then did tshuva? Right? That's the question. Are you better never becoming Tamei or becoming Tamei and then being Matar yourself? Well, that's like the question. Is it better never to have done an Avera or to do an Avera and to do Tshuva? The problem is, though, what do we paskin? Who's better? Who's on a higher level? Someone who never did an Avera, a Tzaddik Gamor, or someone who did an Avera and then did Tshuva? B'makom shabali Tshuva omdim, ein tzadikim gemurim omdim, right? No. Because the Eliyah Rabbah and the Pri Megadim, they both paskin that in the bracha, al ha-tzadikim v'al ha-chasidim v'al ziknei amcha beis Yisrael, it's listing order of tzadikim in order of greatness, and the first person, says Eliyah Rabbah, is the tzaddik, who never did Avera. He's the highest level. And chasidim, that's the Baal Tshuva. Why? Because a tzaddik who never did Avera, says Eliyah Rabbah, is greater than the Baal Tshuva who did Avera and then did Tshuva. Even David HaMelech said he's a chassid because he's a Baal Tshuva, but he wasn't on the level of tzaddik. And the Pri Megadim says the same thing. So how could, that seems to be against the idea we're saying, according to Rabbi Yosef Engel, if this is analogous to who's better, someone who never did Avera, someone who did Tshuva, well, the Pri Megadim and the Eliyah Rabbah both hold a tzaddik Gomer is better, but Baruch Hashem, the Rambam has something to say about this, and the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva disagrees with the Eliyah Rabbah and the Pri Megadim. And the Rambam in number 25 says, let the Baal Tshuva not think that I'm a Baal Tshuva and I'm very far away from the level of tzaddikim because of all my sins. Says the Rambam, it's not so. You are ahov v'nechmad. You are beloved and desired by the Rebbeinu Shalom as if you never sinned. And not only that, your reward is even greater than someone who sinned. And not only that, says the Rambam, Makom Shabbalei Tshuva, Oimdim, Ein Tzadikim Gemurim Yechaylim Lamoid. So says Rabbi Yosef Engel, listen, it's beautiful. This idea that someone who became Tamei and then Tahar is greater than someone who never became Tamei is analogous to the question of who's greater, someone who never did Avera or someone who never did Tshuva. So if it's analogous, it comes out, Rabbi Sai, the Rambam is L'shitase. The Rambam who holds that greater is someone who became Tamei and then went to the mikvah is L'shitase of the Rambam who holds Makom Shabbalei Tshuva Oimdim Ein Tzadikim Gemurim Michayim Ma'amid. By the way, it's machlokes in the Gemara Brachos. The Gemara Brachos on Daf Lamed Daled Beis brings a machlokes. Amaram. Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, anything good you find in Tanakh is only for the Balei Tshuva. But someone who never did Avera, they have even greater. Ayin lo yirasa leikim zu asacha. And Rabbi Avo says, no, nice try. Makom shabalei tshuva oimdim, ein tzadikim gemurim michaylam lamoid. So we have a machlokes amoy roim, and then you have a machlokes between the Rambam and the Pri Megadim. Now, how could the Pri Megadim argue on the Rambam? The Rambam says, Makom Shabbalei Tshuva Oimdim Ein Tzaddik Gomer Oimdim. And in Shemona Esrei and the Pri Megadim, the Eliyah Rabbah say, no, a Tzaddik Gomer is better than a Baal Tshuva. So first I want to tell you something there in a biography, and then I'm going to explain how there's no machlokes. In the biography of the Satmar Rebbe, he quotes this Rambam, that it greater is someone who became Tamei and then became Tar than someone who never became Tamei. And he said it's not always true. It depends what kind of Tumah. A Tumah that you contract unknowingly, like you come into contact with a dead body, it's not emanating from your body, it's not emanating from you, then greater is someone who became Tamei and then Tar than someone who never became Tamei. But if someone had Tumah come out of their own body, Baal Keri, Zav, if someone's Tumah was engineered by his own guf, then greater is the person who never became Tamei. Now let's talk about the Baal Tshuva and the Tzaddik Amor. It's machlokes hamaroim. So who do we paskin like? Well, the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Avohu, Makom Shabbalei Tshuva Oimdim. And the Pri Megadim paskins like Rabbi Chia bar Abba. There's no machlokes. You have to know the Chavos HaVavos. Chavos HaVavos says, sometimes a Baal Tshuva is equal to a tzaddik. Sometimes a Baal Tshuva is greater than a tzaddik. And sometimes a tzaddik is greater than a Baal Tshuva. It all depends on the Avera. If it's just somebody did not fulfill a mitzvah saseh d'oraisa, someone missed the Zman Krishma, someone didn't put on tefillin, someone didn't take the Daled Minim, and then they do tshuva, so then he's exactly equal to a tzaddik, no better, no worse. Then you're equal. Someone who violated a small lav, let's say someone wore shatnez, and then they did tshuva, someone did a lav, a smaller lav, that there's no chi of misa, there's no chi of kares, then greater is the Baal Tshuva than the Tzaddik Amor. Why? Because you only did a small Avera, and now you're doing Tshuva, and you have regret, and you have remorse, and you have Anivos. The Tzaddik Amor may be a little bit arrogant that he never sinned. So if someone violated a Lav, says the Chavas Havavos, then we hold like Rabbi Avohu, B'makom Shabali Tshuva Oimdim, Ein Tzaddikim Gemurman. But let's say you have a mass murderer, and then he did Tshuva. So now you're telling me he's better than the Gadol Hadar? I mean, give me a break. The guy killed people. And now he does tshuva. I don't care what kind of tshuva he did. We'll forgive him, but he's not better than the Gadol Hadar. Someone who violated a chi of misa and does tshuva, he's not better than a tzaddik amor. So the Chavas Havav says there's no machlokes over here. It just depends on the type of avera that was performed, which is exactly what we're saying at the end of the day. The Rambam never said every person who's tamei and then becomes tar is better than someone who never became tamei. He's specifically talking about tumas meis. That's a tumah that's beyond your control. That's a tumah that virtually all mankind that sometimes comes into contact with a meis. And that kind of tumah, better is someone who became tamei and then tar than someone who never became tamei.
So why is he getting credit for that?
But somebody whose own body generates the tumah, we don't necessarily need to say or have any proof or source that he's better off having become tamei and then tar than someone who never became tamei in the first place. But bottom line is we're learning a very important principle tonight about what is the idea, what is the concept of Tahara. Tahara is not just not being tamei. Tahara is a positive madrega. It's a positive quality. It's a quality that can only be achieved after tumah. And we should all be zoicha that Ribon Shem zarakti alecha mayim tahirim utahartim. We should all be zoicha to the mayim atahirim b'vias kal tzedek.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.